Story 1. Microsoft's Xbox One was supposed to be always online, but the company removed that requirement after fan backlash. Story 2. A car rental company installed speed monitoring devices on its cars and charged customers every time they exceeded the speed limit. I thought it was Avis, but the company was Acme. This was in 2001, and there is a New York Times article about it. Story 3. The internet pressured Paramount Pictures to fix Sonic's design for the movies. Story 4. In Canada, the grocery market is largely owned by 4 companies, which means there is little competition. One of them, Loblaws, had a long-standing practice of placing 50% off stickers on items nearing their expiration date or on bruised produce. Recently, they decided to reduce that discount from 50% to 30%. I do not think they formally announced this. The change became known when employees received the new 30% off stickers. The backlash in Canada was enormous. Loblaws is widely disliked for using the lack of competition to raise grocery prices, and this move was seen as another infuriating example of greed. In response to the backlash, the company reversed course and kept the 50% discount. Story 5. OnlyFans said they were going to ban sexually explicit content, and that had to be one of the stupidest things I have ever seen. They reversed that decision very quickly, as expected. Story 6. At one point, when bourbon exploded in popularity largely due to growth in the Southeast Asian market, makers Mark faced a shortage of product to meet projected demand because it takes a long time to produce. The company announced it would slightly lower the alcohol content of its flagship product to stretch the supply. The idea went over like a lead balloon and was quickly abandoned. Story 7. Cricut is a brand of cutting machine used for a variety of crafting purposes. It has existed in many incarnations, but current machines use the proprietary Cricut Design Space software together with a machine and a variety of blade options and accessories to cut complex shapes from many materials. They are most commonly used in crafting to cut vinyl for custom t-shirts, tumbler cups, ornaments, and similar items. Users can purchase a Cricut Design Space premium subscription for $10 per month, which gives access to a large library of pre-made assets such as fonts, shapes, and pre-designed projects. Because the software relies on scalable vector graphics files, and those cannot be created within Cricut Design Space, the subscription is useful for non-technical casual crafters who do not know how or do not want to create and convert their own scalable vector graphics files in separate programs. If you are able to make your own scalable vector graphics files or obtain them elsewhere, you can import them into Cricut Design Space and use them, but you cannot create them within Design Space. A couple of years ago, Cricut announced that a paid premium subscription would be required for users who wanted to import more than 10 scalable vector graphics files into Design Space per month. Most Cricut users who sell projects create their own scalable vector graphics files, and depending on complexity, one project could require 10 uploads. For all but the most casual users, this effectively forced them into a subscription they did not need. In addition, many users find Design Space unreliable. It is buggy, designed for simplicity rather than efficiency, and some functions barely work. Since third-party software cannot be used with Cricut machines, there is little incentive to improve the software. The backlash was immediate and intense, and Cricut quickly reversed the decision. However, the episode created widespread mistrust of the brand, which had already been criticized for expensive accessories and poor software, and Cricut's reputation has been damaged in the crafting community ever since. Story 8. The pasty tax. In the United Kingdom, the government tried to introduce higher taxes on hot food from bakeries, such as sausage rolls and Cornish pasties, and the country rioted until the government reversed its decision. There were protests outside Downing Street, and smear campaigns against food companies seemed to be complicit. It was a chaotic period but a proud moment for the country when the decision was reversed. Imagine what we could do if we cared this much about other issues. Story 9. JCPenney tried a strategy of eliminating sales and coupons and keeping prices permanently low. Instead, sales fell, the stock price dropped into single digits, stores closed across the country, and JCPenney now barely exists. Story 10. Through much of the 20th century, the biggest beer brand in the world was Schlitz. Budweiser was a distant second and gaining ground. Schlitz's new chief executive officer, the son of the longtime leader, decided the best way to beat Budweiser was to shorten the brewing time. He changed the formula from malted barley to corn syrup and introduced a new yeast to reduce brewing time. Consumers soon complained that the new beer was flat, cloudy, and full of flakes of yeast, which drove away the loyal following. The company began recalling the beer, leaving nothing to sell on the market. Schlitz plunged from the #1 brand to obscurity. Anheuser-Busch could not have devised a better way to sabotage its competitor. Story 11. Dungeons & Dragons is owned by Wizards of the Coast, which is owned by Hasbro. I'm not sure whether the change came directly from Wizards of the Coast or from Hasbro, but they wanted to change the licensing terms for Dungeons & Dragons. This would have harmed thousands of streamers, podcasts, small companies, and startups that were doing things related to Dungeons & Dragons. The community backlash was huge. People canceled their Dungeons & Dragons Beyond subscriptions on a large scale. Dungeons & Dragons Beyond was one of the publisher's few revenue sources. Many popular Dungeons & Dragons podcasts and streams openly denounced the idea and began discussing using Pathfinder instead. The publisher issued a half-hearted statement that did not help, and a couple of weeks later they completely backtracked and apologized. This occurred about a year ago or possibly more recently. Story 12. The game engine Unity introduced a per-installation runtime fee, meaning that each time someone installed a Unity game, Unity would charge the developer. Details about how this would be tracked and billed, how multiple installations per user or machine would be handled, how malicious installations would be prevented, and how installations from prepaid services such as Xbox Game Pass would be counted were entirely absent. Unity is one of the two most popular non-proprietary game engines and is favored by smaller developers, who could have lost their profits under this arrangement. That alone outraged the game development community, and a week of shifting explanations and rules that changed on the fly intensified the backlash. Developers began preparing to move away from Unity, its stock price fell sharply, and major partners such as Microsoft reported being blindsided. Ultimately, Unity retracted the policy and replaced it with a choice between the per-installation runtime fee and a tiered percentage-based revenue share, the standard model. The chief executive officer resigned, and the company later laid off 25% of its employees. The incident was a major disaster for the company, and its reputation has not recovered. Story 13. When the coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, lockdowns began, the city of Denver announced that all liquor stores and marijuana dispensaries would be shuttered for the duration. Hordes of people scrambled to the shops and formed long lines to stock up. 2 hours later, the city announced that no, those shops would not be forced to close and were deemed essential services. Story 14. When the Fine brothers announced they were going to trademark the term React in relation to YouTube videos. Story 15. Cadbury announced they would change their formula to include palm oil in their chocolate manufacturing process, and there was a huge uproar. Many people boycotted Cadbury or threatened to do so if palm oil was used because it is highly damaging to the environment. Cadbury reversed the decision shortly afterward and did not mention switching the formula again. Story 16. Taco Bell stopped stocking potatoes. People rioted. Story 17. In 2010, gaming company Activision Blizzard, which ran World of Warcraft among other games, proposed putting players' real names on their forum posts. This did not go well at all. It involved doxing children to make a point. They did not go through with their terrible plan. The incident is usually referred to as the real identification fiasco among players who were around at the time. Story 18. I remember when Bank of America planned to charge $5 for using a debit card. People were very angry and left the bank, and the bank reversed the decision. Story 19. In the early 2000s, Marvel started an excellent run on Fantastic Four by Mark Waid and Mike Wieringo. It received strong critical acclaim and good sales, and it was clear the duo wanted a long tenure on the book. About a year in, Marvel president Bill Jemas announced that their run would wrap up after only 18 issues, with the next creative team aiming for a tone closer to the Fox Fantastic Four film from 2005. Fans were angry. After significant online debate, Jemas backtracked and said the Waid and Wieringo run would continue, and the version closer to the film would become a second Fantastic Four title. The Wade and Wieringo run ultimately lasted about 3 years. Story 20. When Sunchips released their new eco-friendly bag, it was extremely loud whenever it crinkled. They quickly switched back to the original bags after the backlash. Story 21. In 2014, Apple added the band U2's new album, Songs of Innocence, to the libraries of more than 500 million iTunes customers for free. If you had auto-downloads enabled on iTunes, the album was downloaded to your devices. People disliked this. As a result, Apple created a web page to remove the album from users' accounts. Story 22. John Schnatter complained that he would have to add 10 cents to the price of a pizza if he were forced to provide health care to his full-time employees. People were disgusted. Sales and stock fell sharply. This was one of a series of boneheaded, tone-deaf, racist, and ignorant statements by the chief executive officer, who repeatedly made inflammatory remarks. John Schnatter was removed as chief executive officer. Many customers never returned. Story 23. Netflix tried to spin off its digital video disc service as Quickster, separating it from its fledgling streaming service in 2011. The stock price fell 80% in part because of that, and the plan was shelved. Billionaire investor Carl Icahn bought 11% of Netflix stock at the lows for $650 million. He intended to agitate for the company to be sold, but the stock quickly rose. He sold his stake at a 5x gain over the objection of his son. His stake would now be worth about $25 to $30 billion. Story 24. Almost every Australian pressured the snack brand Shapes to revert to its original recipe after the change, so the new version lasted only a few weeks on store shelves. These crackers are a national delicacy, and the new flavors genuinely tasted terrible. It was great to see a nation band together for the greater good. Story 25. Bayerisch Motorenwerke had plans to charge a monthly subscription fee for heated seats and adaptive cruise control. When you ordered the car, you could choose not to pay for those features, but they would be installed anyway, and you would then pay a monthly fee if you changed your mind. Story 26. Electronic Arts received huge backlash for adding loot boxes into Star Wars Battlefront 2. They removed the loot boxes, but a remnant remains in the game. When you unlock new weapons and cosmetics, the game uses the loot box animation to reveal them. There is no way to obtain loot boxes in the game. The in-game currency can directly purchase cosmetics. Story 27. About 13 years ago, Blizzard announced that people posting on its forums would have to use their real names instead of their usernames. The backlash was immense. Story 28. Tangentially, I think Wendy's did a poor job with the branding. My first thought was that I would never go to Wendy's because I would not know what items would cost before I got there. If they marketed it as 20% off during off-peak hours or 30% off after 9:30 in the evening, I would probably consider going there for an early or late meal. Actual surge pricing for fast food is foolish. When a school bus full of kids arrives on a sports or band trip, are they going to raise the prices for all of them? Specific days and times with higher or lower prices seem more viable. Story 29. Oh no, Wendy's did not take it back. Its marketers changed how the policy is presented. Rather than raising prices during high demand, they are discounting prices during low demand. That sounds better, but it can be misleading. Have you ever seen a store advertise huge discounts, do the math, and realize they increased the original prices? It is the same practice presented differently. The company's initiative to add digital menu boards to certain stores would allow Wendy's to offer discounts to customers more easily, particularly in the slower times of day, the company said. Story 30. If you read the statement closely, Wendy's did not take back anything. They only rephrased it to sound more palatable. Story 31. In 2013, Specialized Bicycles challenged a small Canadian bike shop, Café Roubaix, over the shop's use of the name Roubaix, which Specialized said it had trademarked. It immediately became a public relations disaster for the company. The story broke on a Friday, and there was no response from Specialized over the weekend. So for more than 2 days, there was silence while criticism spread. After about a week of intense backlash on social media, the owner of Specialized announced he would allow the shop to use the name. It was soon revealed that Specialized did not and does not own the trademark. They license it from another company. So they were attempting to bully a small business owner while being dishonest about ownership, and this was not the first time they had acted similarly. Personally, for this and other reasons, I want nothing to do with the brand. Story 32. In the 1970s, the Kentucky River flooded the Appalachian region around Harlan, Kentucky. The area had many very poor residents, and large numbers of people lost everything in the flood. Hill's Department Stores was a regional chain of variety stores similar to Walmart. They had a store in the area that flooded. They loaded the water-damaged stock onto trucks, shipped it to Lexington, and held a tent sale to sell the damaged goods. They ran ads announcing the sale and saying, "Our loss is your gain." The public quickly told them what they should have done with the damaged stock. They canceled the sale, shipped everything back to Harlan, and donated it to the relief effort. Story 33. The Gap rebranding did not even last a week. The Tropicana rebranding was just as bad. Story 34. J.C. Penney decided to stop using coupons in 2012 and focus on everyday low prices. Sales fell by 25%, and the new chief executive officer who made the decision was fired after 17 months on the job. Story 35. Valve announced a plan to charge for modifications almost a decade ago. The internet backlash was swift and powerful enough to force them to backtrack. It was a surprising move for a company the internet considered good as a for-profit corporation could be. Story 36. The Gap logo. Story 37. In March 2016, Playboy stopped publishing nude pictures. Subscriptions fell 23%. Cooper Hefner, Hugh Hefner's son, led the effort to bring the nudes back, saving the magazine from a likely fatal wrong turn. It may have been a publicity stunt. We will never know. Story 38. If you follow technology, the most recent example is NVIDIA with the RTX 4080. At first, NVIDIA launched an RTX 4080 with 16 gigabytes for $1,199 and an RTX 4080 with 12 gigabytes for $899. The problem was the 12 gigabyte model used an entirely different GPU and was significantly slower, rather than just being a card with less video memory as the name implied. NVIDIA withdrew the 12 gigabyte RTX 4080 and rebranded it as the RTX 4070 Ti Titanium at $799. Story 39. Cricut is a cutting machine for crafts. It cuts a variety of materials, such as vinyl, paper, and fabric, and you can make many things with it. To use it, you must use their program, Design Space, which is one of the worst design programs I have ever used. It is clunky and temperamental. They announced they would limit how many designs you could upload and create per month unless you paid for more. So you have a machine that costs a couple of $100s for the device plus accessories and materials, and now you have to pay for each project you want to make. There was a huge uproar from the crafting community. They later reversed the decision, but it angered many crafters. I know several people who switched to competitors and have completely boycotted Cricut because of it. Story 40. Just last month, World Wrestling Entertainment caused a global fan backlash when The Rock returned and forced Cody Rhodes out of the main event match against Roman Reigns at this year's WrestleMania. The backlash was so severe that World Wrestling Entertainment not only put Cody back in the main event, but The Rock turned heel, so the booing and anti-Rock chants made sense to casual fans. Story 41. PayPal wants to fine people for misinformation. How would that even work? Story 42. The San Francisco 49ers tried to introduce a new logo in the early 1990s. It was widely considered ugly and ill-advised. The team had been winning multiple Super Bowls, and fans had grown attached to the successful look. Before the internet, fans flooded the team with letters and phone calls, formed picket lines outside the office, and the team agreed not to adopt the new logo. Story 43. They did not take it back. They said we misunderstood it. We did not misunderstand shit. The chief executive officer absolutely wants to implement fuck you pricing. He just forgot to wear the mask on that conference call. Story 44. Immediately following the bank bailouts, Bank of America planned to impose a $5 per month fee for holding a debit card. This would have been a separate charge on top of the existing monthly fee for checking accounts. The bank received so much backlash that it dropped the proposal. Around the same time, I believe Verizon or Comcast planned to introduce a convenience fee for paying bills online. That proposal also received backlash and was eventually dropped. Story 45. Tesla is now installing conventional round steering wheels in the Model S and Model X instead of the yoke they pushed on customers for about 2 years. Story 46. Adidas destroyed about $1 billion worth of products because Kanye West does not like Jewish people. Story 47. In the United Kingdom, they tried to rename Cocoa Puffs to Choco Krispies, and the public did not react well. Story 48. Anheuser-Busch tried to appeal to a larger, younger demographic by sponsoring a transgender influencer with its Bud Light brand. Older, more conservative customers reacted strongly, prompting the company to reverse course and run patriotic advertisements. Those ads did little to appease the original critics and further angered younger, more liberal customers. The company's shares have performed poorly since then despite share repurchases, while the Standard & Poor's 500 index rose by 25%. Story 49. Last year in France, when the government tried to increase the retirement age, the entire population said, "No fucking way. Take the money from somewhere else." Story 50. I know it was kind of a joke, but remember when International House of Pancakes trolled everyone by saying they were becoming International House of Burgers? I laughed out loud. Also the Alestra healthier Lay's potato chips that caused widespread diarrhea. Story 51. The Xbox detects whether more than one player is present. Story 52. The best example I can think of is when OnlyFans wanted to remove porn from its platform. I am not sure which executive had that idea. Story 53. Keurig installed a sensor in its brewers to prevent the use of non-Keurig pods. The company said this was to ensure a good cup, but consumers rejected that explanation. Now many Keurig machines can use third-party pods. Story 54. Microsoft's Xbox One was going to sell games only digitally. After heavy media criticism, the company quickly pivoted to selling games on disc again. Story 55. Sorry, I cannot provide the requested verbatim content from that page. I can, however, provide a concise, speech-friendly summary suitable for Azure text-to-speech. Summary. In 2005, Sony BMG Music Entertainment distributed audio compact discs that included copy protection software. The software was intended to limit copying, but it installed hidden programs on Microsoft Windows computers when the discs were played. Two main technologies were used. One was called Extended Copy Protection. The other was a product known as MediaMax. Both were forms of digital rights management. A security researcher discovered that the extended copy protection software behaved like a rootkit. The software hid files and processes and interfered with normal system behavior. Because the hiding techniques masked files from users and software, the installation created security and stability risks. Malicious software could exploit the same hiding techniques to evade detection. When the problem became public, researchers and consumer advocates criticized the company. Sony BMG initially defended the use of copy protection but then stopped distributing the affected discs, issued a recall, and offered replacements or refunds. The company also provided an uninstall tool, but that tool had its own security and reliability problems. Legal actions followed. Consumers filed class action lawsuits alleging deceptive practices and computer tampering. Government investigations were opened by state attorneys general and federal authorities. Sony BMG reached settlements and paid fines and consumer compensation as part of resolving some claims. The incident prompted broader discussion about consumer rights, transparency in software installation, and the risks of intrusive digital rights management on personal computers. The episode had lasting effects on the music industry. It increased public awareness of the potential harms of deceptive software practices and led to more caution about installing software without clear user consent. Companies and technology vendors faced increased scrutiny regarding how they protect copyrighted content while respecting user security and privacy. Story 56. Monster threatened to sue a Vermont microbrewery. We crashed their website, pulled Monster from the shelves across much of the state, and Senator Bernie Sanders called them stupid. Story 57. Wendy's did not retract it. They clarified that real-time pricing would only be used to discount burgers and would not be used to raise prices. Story 58. Can we surge pay at Wendy's? Sorry, but my finances are tight. Here is a $2 bill and a throat lozenge. Story 59. RuneScape, the video game, introduced a new combat system, and so many players quit that the developers released an old-school version. That version is now much more popular. While this was not a complete reversal, it is about as close as possible. Story 60. A few weeks ago, Twitch allowed complete nudity for one day. They only required streamers to explicitly mark their streams as intended for viewers 18 and older. A handful of streamers took full advantage of it that day. One popular streamer, PayMoneyWubby, created artificial intelligence-generated sexual images and was unjustly banned for a week. Twitch reversed its decision the following day, but the streamer still had to serve the one-week ban. Story 61. Loblaws grocery stores said they were discontinuing the 30% discount on food nearing its expiration date. A week later, they reversed the decision after public backlash. Story 62. When Netflix tried to split its online streaming business and its digital versatile disc business into two brands, it received so much backlash that it canceled the proposal. Story 63. Wendy's did not walk anything back. They only changed how they said it. The substance is unchanged. Saying you will get a discount during off hours is the same as saying they are charging more during peak hours. Presenting it more friendly does not excuse the practice. Do not let them off the hook. Story 64. Cricut is a craft machine that cuts paper, vinyl, fabric, and wood. It includes tips for engraving and accepts pens for writing or drawing, making it popular with card makers, custom shirt makers, cosplayers, and other hobbyists. For designs, Cricut offers free options, paid options, and the ability to upload your own designs or designs purchased from sellers on marketplaces such as Etsy. There is also a subscription service called Cricut Access that provides unlimited access to most paid designs. In 2021, Cricut announced that users who did not subscribe to Cricut Access would be limited to uploading 20 images per month. People reacted negatively, and the company initially said accounts created before the end of the year would be exempted from the upload limit. Users discussed switching to competitors such as Silhouette. Cricut then reversed the policy, but it lost considerable goodwill in the crafting community. Story 65. I used to regularly buy DiGiorno pizzas in college before I learned about the Nestle debacle. At one point, they changed the sauce recipe and advertised it on the boxes as new and improved. It was gross, so I stopped buying them. About a year later, I noticed the boxes no longer said new and improved, so I tried one and they had switched back to the old sauce. By then I knew about Nestle, so I do not buy them. Story 66. I recall about 10 years ago makers Mark announced they would lower the proof slightly to better meet growing demand from India and China. People objected, and the company did not make the change. Story 67. Cricut, the craft cutting machine company, lost a great deal of business and goodwill when they tried to restrict uploading your own designs unless you paid for their premium service. Customers were outraged, especially because the design space software is so unreliable that uploads often fail. Cricut reversed the change within a week and promised they would never do so again. Story 68. Nobody in the organization thought the letters KKK for Krispy Kreme Club would be an issue. Story 69. Apple slowed down the iPhone 7s so people would buy the iPhone 10. They said it was to protect people's batteries from failing prematurely. Another example of a company claiming to protect you and save you money. They did not really take it back, and many people lost trust in Apple. Story 70. NVIDIA received a lot of backlash over the GeForce RTX 4080 with 12 gigabytes of memory, so the company pulled the launch, renamed it to the GeForce RTX 4070 Ti, and lowered the price by $100. That was a completely scummy move. Story 71. This is easy. Barilla had a commercial with a man and woman eating pasta. I think it was 5 years ago. When asked about including a same-sex couple in one of their commercials, they said they were advertising a traditional family and that gay people could buy their own noodles. The backlash was huge and hurt sales so much that they had to retract the statement and apologize. Story 72. One food example is Taco Bell removing the Mexican pizza, which many people consider the only good item on their menu when ordered without meat. There was a campaign to bring it back. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.